So if you are just starting to play Duel Links and you want to get a deck to play in character duels, I definitely think that Blue Eyes is probably the best one out of all of the options that we have for character duels right now. Because not only is Kaiba one of the two, starting characters that you get right after you download the game, the deck is really, really good. And not only is the deck good, the deck is pretty much already like the best version it could be right out of the gate. You don't have to change a lot of cards in the deck. And as you can see, I only changed 2 cards. And if I had more grades for the deck, I would not even want to change anything else because I think this is already as good as it needs to be. And the deck is pretty much like how you play Blue Eyes back in 2022, 2023. It's basically like the Ultimate Dragons version of the deck. It pretty much looks 1-to-1, but we have multiple copies of Alternative White Dragon, and they don't back in the day. Uh, and also, they have Karma Cut, and we don't have Karma Cut. And because of how the meta kind of shapes around the character duel decks right now, we actually don't really need to play stuff like Raigeki Break, which would be a good substitution for Karma Cut, but I actually think that Hallow the Life Barrier is a better trap card that you could be playing because of how the format works in this character duel meta. Because of the fact that most decks don't actually have a really good way of setting up interruptions going first. Most of the interruptions are pretty much just the generic back row that they could play, like Book of Moon or Offerings to the Doomed, just the generic back row that you could play. And decks are a lot better at breaking boards when they go second, because all of the extra deck monsters or in-archetype boss monsters, all of them are based around having removal effects rather than having quick effects that actually stop your opponent from building a board. So a much better approach, rather than to stop your opponent with a single pop, which usually, to be fair, it won't work. Decks can usually play through one single pop, even in this low-powered format. A much better approach is just to try to draw into your Hallowed Life Barrier using your draw spells, like the triple copies of cards of Consonance. Or, in the Onomat deck, you can play Dododo Draw, and then you can just hope that you draw into your Hallowed Life Barrier, and then ensure that you won't die to your opponent's board breakers. And then on your next turn, you can just summon your big guys and then just attack full game, right? So this Blue Eyes deck is basically in the class of decks that are summon big guys and attack, because there are pretty much like 3 different archetypes of decks in the format. One is summon big guys, like, Blue Eyes, Neos, and, Sharks to a degree is also just summon big guys. There's like a second type of deck, which is like Onomat or Yusei Synchrons, which is just like build a board strategies using small monsters to go into the stuff in the extra deck. And, Raigeki Break would be better against those decks because you can just pop their normal summon and then they need to have an extender. And those cards will be a lot less effective against decks like a Neos because you can just make a fusion with Neos Fusion and then Raigeki Break won't do anything. And there's like the third type of deck, which is Cyber Dragons and Dark Magician, which are like the back row decks, right? They have searchable back row that can interrupt their opponent. So those are pretty much the 3 types of decks that are around the game right now, and it's important to recognize what type of deck you are playing, and then you play to the strengths of what your deck is trying to do. So that's the reason why we are playing Hallow the Life Barrier instead of other stuff. But if you like, you can replace the Hallowed Life Barriers with Raigeki Breaks or Book of Moon, but Raigeki Break is probably better because it discards, and discarding is good in this deck because you want to discard your White Stone of Ancients, just like back in the day when people play triple Karma Cut in their Blue Eyes decks. So I won't go into too much about the ratios in the list because it's mostly the same, and it's pretty much the same playstyle as the deck back in the day in 2022, 2023, and you're just trying to discard your white stone and activate your card effects like Hallowed Life Barrier or Awakening Dragon. And then you can trigger the Stone of Ancients during the end phase to summon your big guys from your extra deck, from your main deck during the end phase. Dragon Spirit of White is a brick, but it's pretty good to get rid of back row, especially in this low-powered format where most of the interruption stays in the back row. And then you can either, when you go first, make a Spirit Dragon, or when you go second, make a Twin Burst Dragon to try to attack your opponent's board. So it's a pretty straightforward deck, which is good for a deck that's so accessible for new players. With that said, let's actually look at some replays, I guess. Okay, so on our first replay, we're playing against Muse, which means we're playing against Stardust, Junk Synchron, and friends, I guess. So as I said in the deck profile, this deck aims to just summon big guys and attack, which is a pretty simple playstyle, but there is still some nuance to it. Like, there's still some decision making that you have to do. For example, if you have cards of consonants, you have to decide if you want to draw with consonants first, or you want to normal summon Sage first to get a search to thin your deck before you draw. You have to choose between what you want to do depending on the situation. And our opponent will basically have Stardust Dragons at free pass. One of them will be Shooting Star, and Shooting Star isn't that big of a deal against our deck because our deck just spams big guys, and even if he pops one of them, it's not too big of a deal. We'll draw 2 times with cards of consonants because we drew a second copy, and then we can start summoning big dragons from our hand. A bit of an issue right now is because we discarded so many Stone of Ancients, we actually don't have any more targets in our deck because we drew all of the monsters we want to summon, and the last Blue Eyes is summoned using Sage effect, so we actually don't have valid targets for the 2 stones, so we are allowed to use the stone effect in our main phase without having to worry about it not triggering during the end phase, because if you're not familiar with White Stone of Ancients, if you use the second effect to banish itself, it will no longer trigger its first effect. But obviously it is fine in our case because we won't be able to use it anyway. We'll summon a big guy, punch over our opponent's Stardust, and pass turn. Our opponent will make a Junk Destroyer, try to clear up our board, and this is the reason why this deck is so good, is that the deck has a really strong form of follow-up just by having the stones in the graveyard, and having access to big beefy guys that you can summon every turn applies a lot of pressure to your opponent, which they might not have a way to consistently deal with the constant stream of big beefy dudes that you are able to put up. Our opponent has follow-up, which is basically just normal summoning Junk Synchron, but we do have the Graveyard Negate of Spirit Dragon, which we can negate the Junk Converter, and in case you're wondering why they didn't go Chainlink to Junk Warrior, is because that is a mandatory effect, so it must be Chainlink 1. So we can still negate the Graveyard effect, he can't beat over our Blue Eyes, and he's just gonna scoop. Okay, second replay, we're playing against Neos, and Neos is another deck that basically aims to make big beefy guys. But I think our big beefy guys are better than his big beefy guys because he can pretty much only make a 1 per turn because Neo Fusion locks you from special summoning after you use it. But his big beefy guy has the advantage of having a destruction protection from the Neo's Fusion in Graveyard, and also just having more attack than our guys. So we'll try to get rid of his guy. We'll threaten the Necro Gardener by having the materials for Spirit Dragon. He is forced to use it right away because otherwise we can negate it. But that still is okay because we can still make the fusion using the 2 Blue Eyes in our hand, make Twin Burst. Twin Burst can attack twice, so even the first one doesn't go through, it's still okay because we can attack a second time and then use the effect to banish our opponent's Neos. In an end phase, we'll summon another big beefy guy, and we don't even need the Hallowed Life Barrier because we already have enough big guys on our field, and I'm not really worried about him OTKing, so we can just discard the trap. Our opponent will make the Near's Fusion, spin everything back, and then try to pass turn, but now his board is wide open, and as I said, this deck has a pretty good follow-up by having stones in the graveyard, so we can just summon a big guy, attack, and, well, that would be game. So yeah, thanks for watching, look forward to me covering the other decks in the future. Goodbye.